You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Here we go. Welcome once again to the Grantcast. My name is Grant Baciocco. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for checking out the show. And a big shout out to all of the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Seriously, if it wasn't for them, this show would not be made, and I appreciate their support. Well, we are back at it, friends, back with another episode of the Grantcast, and things are going good here. I stayed up late the other night because my favorite band in the entire world, the Beths, were playing a show in New Zealand. And in Auckland, New Zealand. And what the Beths have been doing, what they started to do at the end of their tour in 2024, is they have an Instagram account called The Beths Do It Live. I think that's the name of the account. And their sound guy, Gabe, will just set his phone or a phone up back at the sound booth, point it at the stage, and shoot the concert and just live stream the concert. And then usually he will delete the video right after the show is over, or maybe a couple hours after the show is over. But this was a big show because this was the first time they had played since last year, which admittedly is not a super long time. But this was, they have taken a bunch of time off and wrote and recorded a bunch of new songs. So there was word that there were going to be new songs in this show. So there was a lot of fan interest. And the way the timing worked out, the Beths took the stage at 12:15 a.m. on Sunday night. But it was like 8 p.m. on Monday or something, or 9 p.m. or something on Monday, their time in New Zealand. So anyway, I stayed up and watched the whole thing. I think the concert got over around, their portion of the concert got over around 1:45 or something like that. They played 4 new songs. They are all great. One of the songs they had kind of previewed at the last show of the tour last year. But the other 3 songs, but that song was just Liz Stokes, the lead singer of the Beths, sang it by herself. And this time it was with the full band singing that song. And then there were 3 other songs that were brand new songs, and they were awesome. So I always get nervous when a band that I really, really love releases a new album, because I just get nervous that, I'm not going to like it as much. And like an example of that is like I was for many, many years a huge Bare Naked Ladies fan. And when the band kind of broke up and Stephen Page left the band, the first album they released was like, okay, this is okay. And then the next album after that and the next album after that. And I was like, kind of, to me, these songs all sound the same. And it was, I don't know, it was, I can't pinpoint exactly what it was, but maybe I was just growing out of a Bare Naked Ladies phase after being in one for so many years. But it's just the new albums did not sound as good as the other albums. And then another case in point was I had always heard about Paramore. I'd heard of them. And I think I maybe heard 1 or 2 songs, and I was like, oh, these are catchy. And then they released the album After Laughter. And I'd seen the first single, Hard Times, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is such a great song. And then I listened to the whole rest of the album, and it's still, to this day, I would say one of my top 10, if not one of my top 5 albums of all time. And then they released the follow-up album, and I just could not get into it. And it was like the After Laughter album seemed very kind of 80s inspired. It was very kind of, in fact, in one of the songs, I always thought sounded like the song Everywhere by Fleetwood Mac, which came out towards the end of the 80s. And this one song, I go, oh, this kind of like, it kind of evokes that feeling of that song. And then they said when they were making this album, they were listening to that song over and over again. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But then the new album, it was like one of the songs I thought was catchy. And then I listened to the whole album and I was like, I can't listen to this is not in my top 10 favorite albums. So, of course, artists are allowed to change and do whatever they want to do. And, I do not begrudge any artist that. And I've done that myself in terms of things that I've worked on where I've changed what I wanted to do at a certain, or changed what I have been doing at a certain point. But anyway, it was, so I was nervous about the Beths, and I was nervous about these new songs. And I can say that at least for 4 of the songs on this new album, I am not nervous because they are great, and I'm looking forward to listening to them. I will just say that the sound on these live streams is not fantastic. So, especially for the 4th song that they played, the 4th of the new songs that they played it was their first song of the encore. And it sounds like a good song, but you can't really make out the lyrics. Like, at least I can't, with my 50-year-old coming up on 51-year-old ears. So anyway, I couldn't necessarily make out all the lyrics, but the music sounds nice. It has a nice beat, and you can dance to it. So very excited that the Beths. But I was up way too late watching the Beths, and then I was trying to record the audio from on my computer from the live stream, and right when it started, I had a bunch of little computer issues, and anyway, I was able to record it, and it's very excited for the new album. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I will continue to say about that. So what I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to talk about when I went to college. I may have talked about aspects of this before, but I don't think I've talked about this one certain aspect. I wanted to go to school to be a special effects makeup artist. And at the time when I was in high school in the early 90s, there were only 2 places you could go to get a degree in makeup. And one place was the Conservatory of Cincinnati, and the other place was Cal State Long Beach. Those were the only 2 places you could go to get a degree in makeup. And I wanted to do it so bad, and my parents were like, you are definitely going to college. And I didn't want to go all the way to Cincinnati, so I literally chose Cal State Long Beach because I wanted to get a degree in makeup so I could work in special effects makeup. And I may have told this part of the story, but I was so into it, I wrote a letter to the professor of makeup at the time, whose name I am blanking on. And I just said, I'm very excited. I think I was a junior, and I'm very excited to come down to this, and I'm very excited. And, Cal State Long Beach is going to be my school because I want to learn about makeup. And he wrote back to me, and he was like, yes, we can't wait to have you. Well, long story, we wrote back and forth a couple times. I go down the summer before I start college to pick my classes, and I find out by looking in the schedule of classes, the course catalog that you have, that he had passed away that summer before I got down there. And so what I quickly found out was that the makeup department at the school, while still being taught by good people, he was the makeup department. He was the guy to teach. He was the head of the department, and he kept the department together. But anyway, because I still wanted to do makeup, and before, I just started taking theater classes because I was like, I got my degree in makeup, but you can just take classes. And at the time, when I was in high school, I had started acting, so I started taking acting classes, or the theater classes as well. And we had a teacher named Karen who was the Makeup 101 teacher. And it was kind of one of those things where she was the cool teacher because she wasn't too much older than all the people in the class. So she was very cool. And one day she brought in a puppet. Her friend had made a puppet. And I was instantly taken with this puppet. Now, I will say that the puppet was made out of, I don't think it was fake. I think it was real rabbit fur. So just and I apologize to any vegans about this. I'm just explaining what this one puppet was. These days, I would not use a puppet that was made out of animal fur. But it was like rabbit fur. If you picture rabbit fur, like a square or a rectangle of rabbit fur sewn so that it becomes a big tube that you put your hand into. And then the head was like latex over, I think it was almost probably like a sock or something. And then this really like kind of gremlin-y face with like those, like teddy bear eyes, but eyes that had little pupils on them. And I remember he had a little green face, and then he had the rabbit fur arms, and they were just like stringy little arms. And then obviously wires in the fingers. He had 3 fingers, and those were covered in like kind of this latexy type stuff. And it was just this cool little puppet that the movement was really good on it. And I was instantly taken with this puppet. And Karen, God bless her, said, "Oh, well, you can borrow it for a while. You can fool around with it." And I took that thing everywhere, and I performed with that puppet everywhere. And I remember my mom came down to Universal Studios like she was coming to a conference. And so she asked if I would drive up and meet her there. And I drove up and meet her, and I brought the puppet. And my mom was in the lobby with all of her friends from the conference, and they were just rolling at this puppet. And at this point, I had fooled around with puppets. I had no puppetry training whatsoever at all, like professional puppetry training. But for whatever reason, I got the lip sync part of it. You know what I mean? Like I knew that when you open your mouth, the puppet has to open their mouth. And I think I had that ever since I was a kid, because I was pretty much a prodigy. Prodigy. What was, anyway. So I knew that I was able to do that. And when I returned the puppet, it had a little hole in the side of the mouth. And Karen was rightfully so very upset because her friend had made her this puppet. And I literally had this puppet for like 8 weeks or something, like a semester and a half or whatever. I had this puppet for a long time. And finally she was like, "Can you bring my puppet back?" And I was like, "Yeah." And the hole that was developing in the mouth was not mistreatment of the puppet. It was use of the puppet. And that's the thing with puppets is when you use them so much, they start to wear down. And I was using this puppet all the time. And I remember like she was really upset about it. And I was like, "I'm sorry." I didn't do anything to it. It just started happening, but it was from use. And I think she was upset with me because she had lent it to me and it came back not in the condition. And I was a freshman in college. I was like, "Well, I can't fix it. Is there something we can do?" And she was just like, "Fine." Anyway, years and years and years later, I think this was like, I think it was during the pandemic or something, the head of the costuming department reached out to me, I think maybe on Facebook or something, and his name is Michael. It was just he's a fantastic guy, and we just hadn't talked in a million years. He was like, "Hey, what are you up to? What are you doing?" And I knew that Karen had worked for the makeup department at the school, but also worked for the costuming department of the school. And I said, "Hey, Michael, do you remember Karen? And do you remember she was a teacher there, I would love to reach out to her." And he had her info. So I reached out to her and I just said, "Listen, I know that you may not remember this. You may definitely remember this. You brought a puppet. I borrowed the puppet forever. And that was my first true experience with a puppet. And now look at what I'm doing. Like I'm doing all this stuff with puppets. And that like if I was on my own episode of Under the Puppet, this would definitely be a story about my first interaction with puppets. Because this was the first time I played around with a puppet and just absolutely loved it and fell in love. And then when I gave the puppet back, I didn't have a puppet. There was no desire to build a puppet or no desire to get a puppet. But It's just a monumental point. And so anyway, I thanked her, and she was very nice, and she wasn't angry with me, or at least she said she wasn't. And that was a seminal part of time when I got to hang out with a puppet and to use a puppet. And still remember to this day. I wonder where that puppet is. I'm sure Karen still has that puppet, but I'm sure she would also not let me anywhere near that puppet. Well, that's going to do it for this time. Thank you so much for tuning into the Grantcast. I appreciate it. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thanks for checking it out. And a big shout out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons. If you want to hear more about Patreon, just hang on a second because you'll hear about that in the closing credits. But other than that, thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye, everybody. This episode of the Grantcast was made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the behind-the-scenes level and above get access to a video of the recording of these episodes, and all paid patrons get these episodes before they are released to the public. Big shout out to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our patron producers, Eve Cunning, Scott Armstrong, Kathy Crawford, Brandy, Lee Thompson, Jeff Toro, Tony Urbano, Ricky Chavez, Vicky Sebring, Paul, and David Akers. If you'd like to become a patron and receive episodes of the Grantcast before they are released, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. And thank you for your support. This episode of the Grantcast is copyright 2025 Saturday Morning Media Grant Baciocco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.